Welcome to Medill Sports Talk, where we break down the news this week for the sports you love. Coming to you from Northwestern's downtown Chicago newsroom, I'm Hogan Davis. Joining me are Jonathan Skinner and Patrick Engel. Today, we take a look at the college recruiting picture, because it's never too early to talk about next season, especially if you're a Northwestern men's basketball fan. But before our analysts talk about the home team, the big recruiting news from last week. Social media sensation, five-star recruit, and South Carolina native Zion Williamson broke Clemson's heart by announcing he's going to be a Duke Blue Devil next season. Jonathan, what does this signing mean for Duke's 2018 recruiting class?
Well, the first thing, Hogan, is that it's unprecedented. This is the first time in the history of ESPN Top 300 rankings that the top 1, 2, and 3 players all signed to the same team. So this is something that's never happened before. And if you look at the players, they're 6'7", 6'6", 6'7". They're all around that same height. So it goes to Duke's sort of positionless style of basketball now that Coach K has implemented that really puts stress on the defense because these guys can play almost any position on the floor. And then the final thing is that it also goes to Coach K's sort of changing perspective since they signed Kyrie Irving about one-and-dones. And now that they're more able to and more willing to go after them, you've seen since 2016, they've gotten the #1 recruit every single year. So Coach K and Duke, in some kind of ways, has become the new Kentucky in a way.
Coach K might be happy, but John Calipari of Kentucky, like you mentioned, was not in a good mood after the announcement, ripping Duke's recruiting tactics. Patrick, should he be worried that Duke has replaced Kentucky as the one-and-done pipeline to the NBA?
Yes and no. Yes, in a sense, because Coach K is 70 years old and he's as good at his job as he's ever been. And the man is 70. That's unprecedented also. But no, because let's not act like this is some kind of crisis for Calipari. He's still got a class of 3 top 35 players, still raking in top 3 classes each year. Even this year, maybe he doesn't have the obvious one and done. This would be the first year since 2008, first year at Memphis when he had Derrick Rose, that he would not have a player picked in the top 10 should no one go in the top 10 this year, and that certainly seems like a possibility. But this isn't as big of a mess as it seems, or some kind of start of a downhill spiral for Kentucky. And if you look at some of their best teams that have gone far in the NCAA tournament and have been #1 seeds, been #1 ranked in the regular season, they've been a mix of veteran players and elite freshmen. And next year, I think that's what you're looking at when you have the classes coming in now, mixed with some of the guys who are coming back next year. That 2015 team that started 38-0, definitely a mix of that. So not a crisis here.
Let's move back to the locals. Ranked as the #24 recruiting class in the country by Rivals.com, the Northwestern men's basketball team has landed 3 4-star recruits and 1 3-star for the class of 2018. Jonathan, has Chris Collins put together a class that should have Wildcats fans excited for next year?
Definitely. I mean, this is the best recruiting class Northwestern has ever had. You look at the fact that they have 3 4-star recruits. First, you have Miller Kopp, a really good guy at spacing the floor, getting open. He's really efficient with shooting from the outside. Then you also have Pete Nance, the brother of Larry Nance, a 6'8" forward. If there's anyone in this recruiting class who has real NBA potential, it's him. He has a really great wingspan, really good defender. And then you close it out with Jordan Lathan, a guy who could take that role that's going to be missing when Bryant McIntosh and Scotty Lindsey leave, of someone who can facilitate as well as score. So if you look at this class overall, Coach Collins has set a great foundation for them to reach the NCAA tournament for the 2nd time in their school history.
Yeah, going off of that, this is a really important class for Northwestern because of what they lost, like you mentioned. And especially I'm going to go with Jordan Lathan. Bryant McIntosh this year has played a lot of minutes for him, and we've seen how sometimes that might limit the offense with some of the efficiency issues he has as a volume scorer. And Northwestern doesn't really have a clear backup point guard. And now you lose McIntosh, someone's got to come in and play that, and they're going to count on him a lot. Miller Kopp really need to provide scoring on the wing there for Scotty Lindsey when he leaves to be another scorer next to Vic Law there on the wing. So crucial class, but definitely one that can do the job and keep replacing some of the guys that took them to that first tournament.
All right, keeping things here with the Cats on the gridiron, the Northwestern football team put together a 10-win season this year and won its 2nd straight bowl game for the first time in school history. Patrick, how high is Northwestern's ceiling for next year?
So I look at this year and think I'm not quite sure how they got to 10 wins, same as it was in 2015 just because of the offensive issues. Clayton Thorson is definitely a better quarterback than he was his first year as a starter now with the ACL. We'll see if he can get back for opening day next year. Now this class is last ranked in the Big Ten in 24/7 Sports Composite. Smaller class, still top 60 nationally. It's about 8 Power 5 teams below them, so could be worse. Have a couple of pieces that are going to help there. Devin O'Rourke, top defensive player in the Chicago area. They were able to get his commitment over a lot of other Big Ten teams. And going to need to replace Justin Jackson. Fortunately for them, it's a player they have on the roster already in Jeremy Larkin that should be able to pick up most of that responsibility. So this class is definitely more one for building later on is more than it is, I would say, for next year.
Pretty hard to keep up with all those overtime wins, too, to keep that going. We are only a few weeks away or removed from another overtime game, one of the most exciting college football national championships in recent memory. While both Alabama and Georgia have top 10 recruiting classes for 2018, the Bulldogs seem to have the brighter future, landing 7 5-star players. Jonathan, if these two teams meet again in the playoffs next year, like a lot of people think, is Georgia's #1 ranked class enough to get the Bulldogs over the hump against the Tide?
Well, I think that it's enough to do that. It was almost their 2017 class was almost enough to get them over the hump this past year. But what you look at what they brought in overall, they brought in the #3 offensive guard to go with the #1 overall offensive line class last year that they had. So they add more depth there. They bring in Zamir White out of Laurinburg, North Carolina, the #1 running back in the country, to help Jake Fromm a little bit more. But Jake's going to have another year of development under his wing. The recruiting class they have this year is the #1 in the country. So you look at all those things combined together, and they'll have enough. The question then comes down to what happens in the game, because they were there this year, and it just didn't work out for them. So I think that they have enough to win, but it just comes down to that final game. I think they'll be back there again, though.
And they've got such an interesting storyline with Justin Fields as a quarterback, the #2 overall player. We saw this great freshman year from Fromm, and they go and get a guy who was committed to Penn State to come in right away. And if you're a #2 overall player in the class, you don't exactly come in and expect to sit. So that competition, I think, is going to be interesting. And just to see if Georgia gives Fromm the unquestioned starting nod right away, which you would think, how can you not? He just led him to the national championship game, and he played well. But you've got a guy of Fields' caliber, and he just kind of shows where they're at of the guys they've been able to get in there. And that's the kind of high level that you got to recruit at if you want to be in the playoff consistently. You look at Alabama, had the same thing. Jalen Hurts takes into a title game, and he gets usurped the very next year by a guy people think is better. So that's the kind of level that you got to recruit at to be in that playoff level consistency, and it sure seems like Georgia's doing that now.
And if you look at what Kirby Smart does, he's not afraid to do that, because he did that with Easton this past year when he came back from injury and he was still okay to play. He stuck with Fromm because Fromm was playing better. So he's going to put out there whoever the guy is that he thinks can win them games. And right now it's Fromm, but we'll see what happens this upcoming season.
And the way he's able to get those two guys to work at this, knowing that if the other guy plays better, the 5-star label doesn't mean anything. I think that's a great dynamic for that team. All right, according to Rivals.com, following Georgia in the 2018 recruiting class rankings is Ohio State at #2, Texas 3rd, and Penn State 4th. Is there anyone outside of that top 4, Patrick, that you think could challenge this year for the playoffs, or that we need to keep an eye on?
So this is going to be a familiar name, but a team that is currently outside the top 4 of those rankings. Clemson. Been in the playoff 3 straight years, but they're starting to recruit at that elite level like we talked about before that gets teams in the playoff consistently and able to win it. And when you look at playoff teams have had classes like this. Clemson's got 8 5-stars in their last 3 classes. This year, 4 of the top 17 players. And that's going to add on already to a defensive line class in Klein and Farrell, Austin Bryant, and Christian Wilkins. All possibly first-round picks, came back to school, signed 2 of the top 3 defensive ends. So it's not inconceivable that you're looking at a defensive line for Clemson next year with 5 or 6 NFL players on it at that point, even if not all of them are starters. And you look at Alabama, Ohio State, the 2 teams that we've considered that have recruited at that highest level more than the other teams, and they just churn out edge rushers. Clemson's certainly going down that path. And they signed the #1 overall player in the country in quarterback Trevor Lawrence.
That definitely helps. All right, guys, that's enough recruiting talk for now. Tune in next week and we'll be back to the pros, giving you our picks for the New England Goats versus the Philadelphia Fighting Nick Foles in Super Bowl 52. Check out all the other segments of MST Episode 4 on our YouTube channel. And follow us on Twitter at Medill Sports Talk. Please like, subscribe, and comment what you want us to talk about next time. For Jonathan, Patrick, and our crew in the control room, I'm Hogan Davis. We'll see you later.